Today's date is November 19th, 2024. My name is Jacob Stickle. I'm the archival assistant here in Warren County. We're here for the Warren County Oral History Project, and I'm here with
Jen Haney-Conover. I am the Director of Records Management and Archives at Warren County Government.
Thank you. And
I'm Jim Spaeth. I am the Warren County Clerk of the Court of Common Pleas is my official title, and I've been doing that for almost 28 years now, with the blessing of Warren County residents.
Thank you for coming. When and where were you born?
Well, I was born in Cincinnati, Christ Hospital, October 15th, 1948.
All right. Did you grow up there, Cincinnati?
No, I grew up in Mason. My parents lived in Mason at the time. My father was actually born on Main Street in Mason, as were his three brothers. And my mother was from Lebanon and grew up on a farm north of town on Utica Road. And they had a little house right on Main Street, right next door to the house that my father was born in. So we've got a lot of ties close to that town, and actually to the county, quite frankly.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a direct descendant of the earliest settlers in Warren County. I've never felt the need to use that in any campaign material, but that is, my father did when he first ran for countywide office, and he said, let people know that he was a direct descendant, and the first settlement was Beetle Station, and the guy I knew as my great-grandfather was William Beetle. It was just about a mile down the road from that intersection of Route 63 and 741, and I think he was the last of the Beetle name, but and now they found a cabin on the prison property out by Lebanon Correctional. That was a cabin that was helped to be restored on site from sighting. And so many people will know it as the Beetle Station cabin that is on display at South Street and Broadway Street in Lebanon now. And so I can claim that I am a direct descendant of the folks that probably had been in that building at some point in time in their life. So.
You're not going to come back and try to say, hey, I own this cabin?
No, I never would do that. I'm just proud to carry on some of the work that previous generations have done to make Warren County a wonderful place to live in and work in.
Yeah. I know you talked to extent about your time in Mason when you were growing up, but would you like to expand on some of your early memories you like to talk about?
Well, it's like any small town, I think in the 50s, we were the earliest of the baby boomer generation. And if I hear it once, I've heard it a million times, how we just were let out, especially in the summertime. Go play, go wherever you need to go, just be home when the street lights come on. And we kind of had the roam of the town, which sometimes I think could have been dangerous for other people, not us so much. some of us in the early days could be ornery, and I didn't want anybody to ask me who my father was at the time, let's put it that way. But not that got asked a lot, but I do have one memory that did happen. And of course I told the guy, and oh boy. and just like anybody else, most of the issues, I can remember my father telling me he got in trouble for smoking on the way to school, but he got in trouble by the school, but that was not a big deal. The bigger deal was when he got home, and his father had to deal with it. So that's the way things were back in the 50s and 60s, and it was a great time, and it really was a wonderful feeling, and certainly hindsight helps with that a little bit to know that the village was looking out for people. Most of them really, we knew everybody in school. We knew by the time I got to high school, we knew everybody in high school from 9th grade to 12th grade for sure. And a few years back, I've realized that I didn't know all the kids coming up through grade school. I've run into at the Mason Historical Society, and some of the stories I hear them telling off camera, oh thank goodness, I'm like, wow. The difference of like 8 years with the last group I was with, and I'm like, you guys were ornery. Anyway, but it was a good town to work in. People did things. I think I mentioned prior to our start here that my dad was a volunteer fireman, along with a lot of business owners back in the day. And that was pretty special because the Mason Volunteer Fire Company, and I can relate to that, and I don't know about the other volunteer fire companies so much in the county, but they covered about 120 square miles inside and outside the county. So their coverage, I know, went from as far north as the prison farm. Well, in the time it was called Lebanon. It was a prison farm, and that's why you see the farm buildings and some of the machinery out there in years past. And they had fire calls out there that were, I'm told, were very intense. They'd probably be more intense than today. Because it's a little bit different style prison, and actually 2 prisons out there now too. So, and the southern end, they went all the way to Sharonville practically, and over to a little crossroads called Gano in Butler County, which is off of Cincinnati-Dayton Road, which it is still called Cincinnati-Dayton Road, but when I call it Old 25, my wife especially rolls her eyes and said, I don't know where that is. If I say Cinday Road, I'm okay. But, oh well. No, and they just, they had a lot on their plate, and they took care of a lot of things. 75 was a new interstate highway through the area. They had a lot of calls out there and things like that. So it really grew and outgrew itself, and by the time it outgrew itself, that goes along with some other things that I did later on in my life that I got involved in.
Fair. Would you like to talk about some of the different jobs you've held prior to?
I've held more jobs. It's given me about 5 or 6 lifetimes, it feels like sometimes. But I had, early on, my very first full-time job was in a little radio station in Bowling Green, Ohio. And I did everything. I did news, I did sports broadcast, I did sports play-by-play for a year, a season of Bowling Green University basketball. Before Title IX, so it was a men's team. Mm-hmm. But I had a chance to get that in prior to me joining the Navy. And I spent 4 years in the Navy, trained as a Serbo-Croatian linguist in Monterey, California. Tough duty for a year. And that was basically my wife's and my honeymoon, since we got married the day after boot camp was over. And she was able to be with me the whole time there, even 3 months in smack dab in the middle of Texas, in San Angelo at Goodfellow Air Force Base. How 4 sailors ended up there, I'll never know, but we had to learn to operate a radio and touch type, so we could listen in on military communications out of Yugoslavia. And from there we went to Rota, Spain, which is a naval base that the U.S. leased from the Spanish government, and it's about 75 kilometers north on the Atlantic shore from Gibraltar. And so it was kind of a liberty town on top of being a sub-tender base and having an airfield there for the flights that our group would make. But yeah, those aircraft carriers would come out of the Mediterranean and they'd invade Rhoda. It was different. It was different. But so I spent 4 years there, but I didn't use the linguistic training I got because by that time Marshal Tito had warmed up to the west, and he was not so much a real tight part of the Soviet bloc at the time. And they were only broadcasting their radio station 18 hours a day, and I heard a call on the radio that said, "Hey, if you're interested, we'd like to go 24 hours if you can help us out." And I got down there as soon as I could, since that's what I really wanted to do when I got into the Navy. And I got permanently loaned to American Forces Radio Rota, Spain for the rest of the 2 years of my tour there, and ended up being the morning host of the radio station. It was the only entertainment we had on base, American entertainment. We had no television. Those were saved for other bases, I guess. I know the Air Force Base in Torrejon in Madrid had TV and radio, but we didn't have TV, so we had to make do with our radio, and we played games. We had a great engineer who rigged up all kinds of signals and buzzers, and we would invite groups to come in and compete against each other in some crazy things that probably did start on TV, but we put them on radio. And just a lot of fun. We had about 10,000 military independents that were stationed there, and got to do some broadcasting or play-by-play there for the football team. We had a base football team that would go to Germany and Italy and be destroyed by all the Army teams. But I got to go to those countries and those bases up there and broadcast back the football games and whatnot. So, but I've been very blessed in a lot of almost every aspect of my life. So after the Navy, I came home. I worked for Ford Motor Company, working in assembly line and sub-assembly line eventually. And in between layoffs, I got a job at another radio station in Fairfield and worked as a morning show host there for about a year. Went back to Ford. I got my badge of honor, as they say in radio, on-air personalities, where you get fired. If you get fired, you got a badge of honor. Well, I got fired on a Tuesday, paid through Saturday. Friday, Ford called, said, "Can you come back to work for us on Monday?" Yes, I can. And so I stuck with them for about 5 years and worked my way up to a quality control supervisor position. And then they shut down the plant and I got laid off again, and did a lot of just roofing, carpentry type work for my father-in-law, who was a skilled trades carpenter at Ford, actually. And so he kept my brother-in-law and I busy while we were laid off. And yeah, working with my hands an awful lot there. And then after a year and a half or so, I saw a part-time job, weekend job come up at WUBE in Cincinnati. And I knew a guy there who I'd worked with at the Fairfield station. So I went in and gave it a shot and got hired as a weekend air personality at what's now known as B-105 in Cincinnati. So, and I worked weekends for 16 years for them. Pretty much not right away, but Saturdays and Sundays, I would have shows on the weekends, and kept my fingers in the radio business that way. But soon after I got that job, the quality control supervisor job that I had at Ford got me a job at a little company in the same neighborhood but called Mercury Instruments, but it had nothing to do with the automotive mercury. That was in the natural gas industry, and they made instrumentation that went on gas meters, not so much domestic or the meters in your home, but on industrial meters. So our customers were utility companies for big transmission lines and things like that. Our instrument went on there to measure pressure, temperature, and volume, because as they say, that little wiggler on a meter doesn't know how much pressure is on that line. And so I got to go back to my high school days of physics and learn about Charles' law and Boyle's law and apply that, and eventually become the training coordinator for Mercury and training our employees and doing things like that. So, and I did that for almost 16 years, about the same period of time. And in that same year of 1981, I decided to run for township trustee in Deerfield Township. And the main reason I wanted to do that was because the township in the area of Mason and Deerfield, they were the ones responsible for putting on tax levies for the fire department and the EMS. And I am not one to be those guys that run into burning buildings and that sort of thing. But I wanted to, having been around it all my life, or my early life, even as an explorer scout, that was a troop that was sponsored by the fire department. I just realized I was more of an admin guy. And so, but I got involved and won my first election in 1981, and served 4 terms, 4-year terms as Deerfield Township Trustee. And unfortunately, I had to leave that last year of that 4th term because the job I hold now as clerk of courts came up, and I wanted to give at the county level. Quite frankly, I had been asked to run for county commissioner several times, and I think I enjoyed what I was doing too much, even though I was doing a lot with working weekends, having a full-time job, having a trustee job where you work a lot of evenings, not a lot of evenings, but a couple of meetings a month minimum, and things like that, but things that had to be taken care of all month long. Quite frankly, I had a 3-year-old daughter that was a surprise for us. Our daughters are 19 years apart, and she was 3, and I thought, you know what, I've already been through 3 jobs with raising the one child, and I thought I want to do something where I can bring it down to 1 job, and that's what I was blessed to be chosen out of the 3 of us who ran for an open seat, and since then I've only had opposition 1 time in a primary, and that was just the last time, and so I've weathered 7 terms. Because I truly enjoy the work that we do in the court system, in the clerk's office. And the funny thing, and my wife will be the first to tell you that I am as forgetful as anybody can possibly be. But for some reason, the battery of tests that we took in the Navy in boot camp, I remember the heading of the one that came back to me was clerk. It just took me 25 years to get to that. I don't know why I remember that, but I do remember it's like, how did I get chosen for, to be a linguist and not into radio and this sort of thing, but that heading clerk said it all. So I guess it stuck with me, but I certainly was not going to try and follow into my father's footsteps as county auditor. He was truly a numbers guy in math, and not that I'm not good at math. I think I am, but and we had his successor was in office already, and he was an old friend. I knew him when we were in high school. So, Nick Nelson. He was a couple of years older than me, but and we actually worked together one summer after. It was actually between my junior and senior year of high school. I think my dad was kicking me out of working at the dry cleaning business. I don't think he wanted me to continue in that. So he said, you need to find another job. Well, of course, my father probably greased the skids a little bit, and I went and had an interview with the county engineer at the time, Stanley Markey. And I got hired at the engineer's office to work the roads. And that year we were doing a survey of all of the culverts, big and small, that went under every county road in the county. And we had 2 crews of 3. And Nick Nelson was my crew leader, and another fellow and me. We just drove around on county roads, and every culvert we came to on our assigned path, we'd get down in the weeds and figure out whether it was in good shape or not, and report it. And that was my first county job that I ever had. So I have not included that in my retirement package, if you will. It was only, and then I worked the next summer. I came back from college and worked there as well. Well, it was actually between my senior and freshman year of college, but then I was definitely cutting weeds and flagging for the road, the paving crews on some paving jobs, and I only got close to being run over one time, but. That guy's lucky that he got away, because he actually went through some blacktop that had not been rolled yet, and they were not happy campers. I think that roller would have taken that car and put it where it needed to be.
Yeah.
But that's one I did have to jump out of the way on that one. He was flying low and coming up on a hill and right through the stuff, and I'm going, no. Anyway.
What was your education, and how did it prepare you for those jobs? You had so many, but...
I know, and I've had so many probably because I didn't do well in college. I was 17 when I went to college. It was during Vietnam, and it was 1966 when I started college. And I was in Air Force ROTC, did that sort of thing, and took and I did make it a math major. I didn't even know what I wanted to do. They made me, you have to have a major. Math, I don't know. So like I said, my dad was good at numbers and math, and that's what I think he really wanted to do. But my mother told me later in life that he really didn't enjoy the dry cleaning business, truly enjoy it as a profession, but he made it successful.
Is that what your dad did as well, or before he was auditor?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, 18 years in the dry cleaning business. Right after the war, he went to dry cleaning trade school in Silver Springs, Maryland. Pardon me. And came home, and they started Spaeth Brothers Cleaners. His older brother was also mustered out of the Army. Dad was in the Marine Corps, and started Spaeth Brothers Cleaners, which eventually evolved into Ellen's Cleaners and Laundromat. And Ellen was my mother's name, so she got her name up on the sign the last few years. And they had put in a laundromat because in the early 60s the dry cleaning business was going downhill anyway. Polyester just kind of did that in. And we used to do hats too. We had a guy that came out of Cincinnati that picked up our hats. Jack the Hat Man, just a wonderful guy. I just always remembered it. Black man coming up and doing delivering hats that he'd cleaned and stuff like that. But I always enjoyed being there when Jack the Hat Man came. And just one of the people in the business that I just never will forget. But at any rate, so we made it a laundromat. So I got the Pepsi-Cola machine concession. So as long as I kept it filled and got the stuff ordered, it was my money. And so it was my first business. And I learned how to change solenoids and washers and dryers and work on them a little bit. So it made me a little bit more handy around the house, I guess. But yeah, so am I sidestepping the college thing again? I didn't do well in college. I had a fellow that I went all through K through 12 with, Bob Urbeck, and he got into broadcasting, and he had gone to a trade school. Even though we had everybody's farm in our backyard right underneath the WLW tower, I had only been to that show a couple of times, and I guess I didn't really get the feeling that that's what I wanted to do or anything at the time. But he just told me one night we were together, he says, with your pipes, you got to get into radio. And I said, well, it sounds intriguing. And I had done, actually we both had done a couple of stage plays in high school. And he had the lead the senior year, I had the lead in our co-lead, I guess I should say, and his was a co-starring lead too. But my junior year, I had that. And so I looked into a trade school and found one in Columbus. It's called Career Academy School of Broadcasting. And after I talked to my parents about it, and they kind of agreed. I don't know that I actually really got them paid back for that one. I think that was kind of the arrangement, but I think because I did so well there that they probably forgave that debt, which I was very grateful for. It wasn't all that much money, but in 1968 it was a lot of money. And so I went during the summer in between terms at Bowling Green to Career Academy School of Broadcasting. I came in second in my class, grade-wise, but I was one of the first ones to get a job even before we graduated, part-time job in Columbus working for WCOL, which still goes by those call letters, but at the time it was a top 40 station. And they were doing a remote broadcast as they did every year from the state fair. And they needed a couple of people who were cheap labor, I'm sure, to come and run the control board for them downtown studios. And so 2 or 3 of us from the school got picked to do that. And I got to do the morning slot, which was really intense in a big city. It was a big deal. And I think some of us made some mistakes along the way, as newbies would. And we were told that there will be no more mistakes the rest of the time. So we cracked down, and I don't think there were. I think we did a pretty good job. I got offered a job on their FM affiliate after I finished school, and I said, no, I'm going to go back and give college another shot. And by that time, my father. He was a little hesitant, and he said, what are you going to do when your voice doesn't hold up? Mm-hmm. So I said, I'm going to get into radio, TV journalism. And so I'll have that as a backup. And I can be behind the scenes. I don't have to be out front. And so I changed my major to radio, TV journalism and got into that program, although it was geared more towards print journalism. And so I wasn't that enthralled with it, I guess. I went back to Bowling Green. I got a part-time job at a little radio station, and I'm not real sure. Anyway, the bottom line is I ended up, I'll just say it, I flunked out of school. They asked me not to come back. Although I did go back in the summer while I was working full-time just to see it, and paid for it myself since I had a full-time job, and I had already screwed up what my parents had wanted me to do, because I'm sure it was more them than it was me pushing that direction, you know. And I can't blame them for that. I mean, it was not a real fun time to be getting into schools or a livelihood with a war going on, that sort of thing. As a matter of fact, I lost one of my very best friends that summer of 1969, and my mother, of course, no cell phones back in those days, and she called me to tell me as soon as she had heard, and I was on the air doing a rock and roll show, and I picked up the phone, and she gave me that news. That was tough. That was tough getting through, but I did. You do what you have to do in those situations. It's no different than any other job where you meet challenges and you have to get through them. And so that it was probably good groundwork and foundation for doing something like that. Mm-hmm. And the fire in the radio station later that year was also a good one for that. Well, I had to keep the station on the air, keep doing my show while the firemen were running back and forth in the other part of the studio putting out a fire, with smoke getting closer and closer to me. And but I got down on my knees and did a newscast, and we muddled through. I just kept playing the music. I didn't talk, and my program director wondered the next day. He found out what happened, but he says, "I was wondering why you weren't following the format." But he was pleased that I got through it all. So I knew that I was ahead of the draft. That in the later years of Vietnam, they went to picking your birthday, and that was the way they picked people from one to whatever. And I was before that, so I was grandfathered into my name. So I knew that was going to happen. So I had worked with the radio station. I wanted to get through that play-by-play of Bowling Green University basketball so I could have that on my resume. And then I had to decide between the Air Force, which I had been in Air Force ROTC, as I'd said, mm-hmm. and the Navy. And I don't know, the Navy just sounded like they could do more for me, and I just wanted the service to, if I'm going to go into the service, I want to go in on my terms. I messed up college, maybe they can straighten me out. And hopefully hindsight will say that, yeah, they did. And so, but I chose Navy and joined on a 120-day delay program to get me into the spring. And so I was through the basketball season. I had to go to the spring because Bowling Green had a good year that year. And except for Ohio U, we would have been we would have won the MAC. But at any rate, we didn't. We came in second. So we didn't get to go to the NCAA tournament. But I joined the Navy on May 4th, 1970. And a lot of folks in Ohio my age may remember that. I know my wife won't ever forget it. That's the day of the Kent State shootings. And the night before, I dropped her as my fiance off at Kent State. And she was on campus that day, but not on that side of campus. And I didn't know what happened because I was in Cleveland getting sworn in and flown to Great Lakes Naval Training Center, and I'd hear all these stories the week after I got there, and we had no contact with any print media or TV. Mm-hmm. And by the time I got to a telephone, it was almost a week later. And she was fine, but when my mother answered the phone and said, "You haven't heard?" I'm like, what? She could have started that a little bit differently, but she didn't, and that's okay too. So Linda found her way home eventually, kind of a circuitous route over to Steubenville and Greyhound bus home. But and they didn't have classes the rest of the month there either. But so that was an eventful day for us, both of us.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so it won't be forgotten anytime soon, I'm sure. And so that's where I put the 4 years in, and you already know the rest of the work history.
Yeah.
And I've bored so many people with all of this. So. Well, it does go to a lot of my background and how I've been able to handle certain situations, I think. And military does that a lot for you. And not only that, but I mean, I was very lucky. I mean, you go to wherever they tell you to do and go in the military, and to go to Southwest Europe for 2 years instead of Southeast Asia. Big deal. I've got Bob Urbeck, who got me into broadcasting. He went to Hollywood, became a cameraman, and did shows like the Mike Douglas Show, where he got kissed on camera by Olivia Newton-John, and Different Strokes, the Jeffersons, and there's more credits than that. And he was very well respected in his field, and actually was doing some things late in his career there with animation and digitizing a lot of different things. So, and helping newer companies get that done. Unfortunately, now he's in a VA. Well, this week he was in a VA hospital having a toe or two amputated due to Agent Orange. And the cancerous things that come from that, and because he got into a construction battalion, and I think he went through the University of Cincinnati and went through their media program and whatnot. But yeah, and so he's got the most positive attitude I've ever known from a person, and he's one of those. And he said it first, a forever friend. I guess, and the kids would, the kids probably don't say this now, the BFF, but best friends forever. But he called me a forever friend this week on Facebook, the few times I ever get on Facebook, and it was Veterans Day. And there were a couple of guys on there that I had some nice chats with, but going to have to do the phone chat with Bob one of these days. But yeah.
Despite being on Facebook, it's very sweet. We mentioned the Deerfield Trustee and your radio personality. How did you balance all three during that time before you became Clerk of Courts?
Well, I think it was fairly easy, if you can say easy about balancing anything like that with a home life and whatnot. And we had by 1981, our oldest daughter was 6 years old, and I had the full-time job at Mercury, and that was truly a 40-hour-a-week job. The owner of the company was like, "You're here from 8 to 5, giving us your all. Get out of here at 5. Get home to your family." When we traveled, get home on Friday night. Maybe we'd have to leave early or late on a Sunday night, but definitely the kind of guy I wanted you. We'll take you 40 hours a week, but your family gets you the rest of the time. Great company to work for. I really kind of hated to leave because I knew I couldn't go back, because that was one of their philosophies was once you leave the company, you don't come back. And it was, that didn't sink in real quick on me, but it did eventually, and I understood it. There was a time when we had a layoff and they needed to fill a slot in the desk next to me in marketing, and they said, "Who's out in the shop that can come up here and do this job?" And I said, "You just laid him off." And we got him back. I was happy that they brought him back because he did not leave on his own. He was just unfortunate to get laid off, and so anyway, that's a little bit of a digression, and I do that really well. You'll ask any of my employees. So Mercury was the 40-hour-a-week job. I already had the weekend job at B-105 and was doing at least an early Saturday morning show. And I don't think I was working Sundays then until maybe later that year. And then that November is when I ran for Township Trustee in 1981. So I got all of this together from Christmas of 80 to Christmas of 81, and I got, wow. So I had income from 3 different areas, which helped a little bit too, especially since we had just built a new house when I was working at Ford, making some very good money too, and I had to be able to keep up with that. So, and we got through, and I was happy to get that house paid off eventually. So now we're sitting in a home that's still the same house. We didn't have to expand. That's why we had kids 19 years apart, so you don't have to bigger house, right? Oh my goodness. At any rate, so the township trustee job was mostly meetings in the evenings. And eventually, within a couple of years after getting that position, we hired a full-time administrator. It was the first time we had ever done that at the township level. But Deerfield was growing so exponentially then. And so that was the right move for us to do. We tried it with a retiring trustee who was also retiring from work as a banker. And he said, I'll let you know whether I think you need it or not. And we thought it's a good experiment, and it didn't take us very long to understand it. Yeah, I don't think he worked more than a year part-time. So he said, yeah, you need a full-time guy and a person. And so that's what we did then. And so evenings and weekends and the full week. And I just made it work. I must say, on Sunday mornings at church, my father would just look at me and say, you look tired, son. I am tired, Dad. but you know, I probably got a lot. I know that I still have a lot of household projects that I need to get straightened out. I've got a garage that's in terrible shape, and you can't do much in the house if you can't move things to the garage in a little bungalow like ours. So I'll be keeping busy after retirement for sure, at least near to home. And I must say that part of the deal about having 3 different directions to go, I did kind of mess that up a little bit in that in 1999 we bought an ice cream shop in Mason. And so a soft serve seasonal business. It was seasonal, and that was part of the draw to it. Plus the fact that I grew up a half a block from the Whippy Dip, as we ended up calling it. Tucker's Whippy Dip. I was Mr. Tucker, but technically no. That was my wife's and her sister's maiden name, and that's where the Tuckers came from. I don't know how many people really know that or not, but and now it's just, we sold it to a guy after 24 years, a gentleman that has Chubby's Pizza in South Lebanon, and he calls his Chubby's Whippy Dip, and I think he has a couple other stores in Blanchester and maybe Goshen, and I think he's trying to, he has a pizza shop in Morrow, and I think he wants to put a Whippy Dip in there too. So we sold it to Dennis Hoff is his name, and now it's called Mason Whippy Dip. I wasn't crazy about that name, and when we were trying to figure out, we wanted to change the name, and it had a name called Boomerangs, and that didn't really mean a lot to us as far as, you know, what it really was all about. And we needed to change it. And I called a previous owner's daughter who was a year behind me in school. And so and she married a guy in my class. So this is small town Mason coming through. But I said, Donna, what did your mom and dad call the place? And she says, oh, you know, it's something like Conover's Dairy Delight or something like that. And she said, Jim, you know we all called it the Whippy Dip. I went, no, I don't remember that. I can remember Clerk as a heading on my boot camp stuff, but I can't remember that we called it the Whippy Dip. So we called it the Whippy Dip. Put the Tucker name in front of it and had it for 24 years. And so, again, seasonal, we feel like we did a really successful job with it. And I was able, really some of my goal was, I had to dig deep to send my older daughter, thank goodness, to only 1 year of college, and she went to radio school. It helped her with her voice. She wasn't all that great on radio, but she works call center work and has for many, many years. And so her telephone delivery has, I think, got her that job. And that, anyway, so the younger one grew up in the shop, and we used her as slave labor when she was 10 years old. But she was good at what she did. She's good at whatever she does. She is. And speaking of going back to the math that my father and I were good at, she's a high school math teacher at Carlisle. And she's in her 9th year of teaching, and as we're doing this interview. And she loves it, and she loves Carlisle. It's really worked out well for her. And she enjoys teaching tremendously, and she's using those math skills. Hey, I could take math, but I don't know if I could teach it. But she's been through the algebra, the geometry, and she's up into teaching AP classes now, with calculus and whatnot. So I can't say I did take some calculus classes in college, so I just claim that she got it all from me, my dad. Anyway.
I remember when she was still in college, because she went to Miami, correct?
Miami.
Yep.
Gosh,
I can't believe she's been teaching 9 years now. That's
I can't either sometimes, but it is. Yeah, she's 19. To be honest, she got some federal voucher grants while she was in teach grants while she was in college, and as she got out, she knew that she'd go to a school, and the way that they determine where you can get them redeemed was how many breakfast meals they provide the school for kids. It had nothing to do with, average income in a town or anything like that, but it had to do with the meals. And so it was still in Warren County. She wanted to kind of stay close, I guess, and be able to vote for me. So she went to Carlisle, and she knew that she had to stay for 4 years to get those teach grants forgiven, and she did that. But even during that time, I think her second year of teaching, she was the co-head coach of the girls' soccer team, and she did that for at least 4 years, if not 5. And that's when she backed away from that activity, and we now have a grandchild. So and he's 2 years old, and he's a pistol. He's fun. We had to wait into our 70s to get our first grandchild, so we're feeling pretty good about retirement and all of that too.
Yeah,
we get to see him a couple of times a week. We're very fortunate, and I know a lot of folks who don't get to see their grandkids very often, but we're still watching. My daughter still plays soccer, and she'll play soccer down in wall-to-wall in Mason, and so it's a co-ed league. She loves playing against guys and beating them up. She's known to give refs a hard way to go when they call a foul on the guys when they foul her, and then they say, "Take it easy on the ladies," and she's like, "Well, I can't say that on camera." But I got some fun kids, and grandkids. So at any rate, so that's not a nutshell, but. That's it. And that's where now I'm just doing clerk of court stuff and trying to figure out how I transition and other. I really don't know. People say I need to keep busy. Something tells me I'm not going to have any trouble with that, even after I get the home stuff done. I'll find something.
You mentioned the garage.
Well, the garage is a big project right now. If I can get that started now, I'll be all right. Heck, I just feel good about getting my whole grass, my yard cut this past weekend and getting all the leaves off of it so I could cut it. But and I'm thankful that I can still do that at 70. I'm 76 years old, for crying out loud. Why am I still doing this and not having somebody else do that? But I enjoy it. I truly do. So and blessed to be able to do it. I don't know. Bob can't do that out in Palo Alto, California. So, but I can, and so we don't make a big deal out of it, but we just keep plugging away.
Just keep going. Just keep plugging away. I like that.
So we know, of course, that you've been clerk of courts for quite a while. What was it that made you want to run for that? Obviously, I know you talked about the numbers wasn't really your thing. Obviously, your dad was a very respected politician and elected official within the county. So what was the pull to clerk of courts? And can you talk about, how that, what was the most rewarding part of that for you of eventually becoming the clerk of court?
Wow. Like I said, I had been asked to run for countywide office in the commissioners' races from time to time, and I, as a township trustee, we're doing basically the same kind of thing. And I noticed one of the other, you guys gave me a nice cheat sheet here that I glanced over briefly, and one of the questions was what was one of the biggest moments in my career as a township trustee, something along those lines. And really, that was bringing Procter & Gamble Business Center to reality in Warren County. Deerfield Town, the farm that Procter is on now, had actually been sold to Natorp Corporation, but they were still using it to grow trees and shrubs and that sort of thing for their business. And it was 250 acres, but it was in the township, and so we had the first go at the negotiations over things like tax abatement and things like that and how it would affect infrastructure. So that was just part of what drew me to a trustee job anyway, to start there and because I had asked my dad, I want to give back somehow, and what do I do? I'm not crazy about city council. It doesn't really, and I lived in the city of Mason. But like I said, the fire service drew me to the township job. And I guess and being able to be part of a growing community as Deerfield was, and Mason, and at that time, Mason and Deerfield elected the township trustees. Now it's been separated, and Mason has what's called a paper township. And so all of the inside millage tax money and things, it doesn't get shared with the township, and vice versa. But I digress. And then, being involved in things like that were important to me. And when people started asking me about countywide, I'm like, yeah, that's feasible. I think I'd be interested in doing that someday. So I looked. This is while Dad was still in office, I guess, or maybe he retired in '87. And I looked at the landscape. Commissioner was out, auditor was out. I really wasn't crazy, although math, I'm good at that and whatnot. The treasurer's office, I think they had a path there for people that were coming on. Cicero Feltner was the one that ran for the job. He was the chief deputy the same year that I first ran for clerk. I know we went on the campaign trail together a lot. And he had a chief deputy that rose to the next one. That guy had a chief deputy that rose. So I knew that path wasn't what I really wanted to do. Recorder, that was pretty much set in stone. I mean, Edna Bowyer was the recorder for a long time. And Beth Deckard was her chief deputy. And so she was entrenched. And I think she had already been elected in like 1992. So in the clerk of court's job, I knew the clerk who was there, Paul Harrison. He had been my dad's chief deputy for the first 10 years of my dad's terms as auditor. And then he ran for clerk of courts, and he had a chief deputy. But that person passed away. And Paul never did put another chief deputy in after that. He just had supervisors in the areas that he was responsible for in our office. And so I'll be honest with you, somebody from his office called me up one day and asked me if I would be interested. And yes, honestly, that was the one job earlier on, even that I thought that I would like to do and be involved in the justice system. I had met Judge Fetters, Dan Fetters, years before that, and I knew somewhat. Neil Bronson was the second judge that was in the general division that year, and Jim Flannery by that time had moved from being prosecutor and had been elected to the domestic relations court. And I had known Jim since he first ran for prosecutor in 1980. And he that was the first time, other than my dad. I mean, I was 14 years old when my dad first got elected to countywide office. And yeah, I got a picture of me on the wagon at the fair, waving at the crowd with my siblings and my mother and Corwin Nixon and his wife and a commissioner, his name was Art Harp from Franklin, and his wife. And my dad's waving this way and I'm waving this way, and I'm like, I was really into it. I never had to worry about, I didn't ever campaign for him when he was on city council or anything like that, but boy, when I saw that. And so I think that piqued my interest early, very early on. But in talking with them, and I came up and I learned about the job a little bit, and I got some insight into it. And one of the most important things about, I really think any county, any political job, any elected job in particular, is money. You better take care of the money. And that's the first thing my dad, advised me. He says, you take care of that money, make sure it's right every month, and you're going to be okay. And that's what we've tried to do. So I, having been a township trustee for 15 years, almost at that time when I had to decide, I thought, I can do this. I've got a lot of guys, there's a lot of people that don't use much of a stepping stone, if you will. But back in the day, we used stepping stones. Well, I had a 15-year stepping stone. And I think it helped me tremendously. Gosh, I had to run in a primary with 3 guys. And it's the first time I'd ever run in a partisan race. So I'm running not as a nonpartisan. I'm running against not just family, but literally family, because one of the other people in the primary was my mother's distant cousin. And the other guy was a guy I went to church with. Not at that point in time, but previous to that, and still lived in Mason, had been a city councilman, was the liaison with the township. And so we all knew each other really well. that was probably the toughest thing I've ever done, is running that race, and a partisan race was so different, because I think one of the things that I had tried to tell the Central Committee and people that were involved politically that way, that, hey, if general election time comes and I got opposition, I can get you some Democrat votes. I just felt really confident about that. And now, somewhat, I look at the landscape now and I'm like, it's so divided, you would never dream of even saying that to anybody, because they don't care whether you can or not. They know it's not a big deal. It's kind of sad in a way. It really is. And maybe it's a good time for me to be retiring anyway then. But because I've always tried to embrace, and certainly as an elected official, once you get that commission from the governor and the Secretary of State saying you're the one, number one, as a township trustee, I felt like a whole ton of bricks got lifted off my shoulders, because I got two people here on either side of me that I got to pull to the middle most of the time anyway. And that's the way commission works here at the county level as well. It can. I mean, I just had a Democrat on one side and a Republican on the other, and we still got to get together, even though most of the time 2 votes gets it. But anyway, pardon me while well, that came more from the township level, but I think the bottom line is that I had thought about the clerk's office before. When you get asked to consider it, just like they had asked me to consider a commissioner's job, and I thanked the people that asked me, but no, I liked the tone of my jobs at the time, so I didn't go that direction. I think this was the best spot for me. And the other side of it, a lot of it had to do with the title department and the certificate of title division in a clerk's office. You know what, your name gets out on, when I first was elected, it was on anybody that lived in Warren County that had a car title, they had my name on it. That's not the truth now, but there's a whole lot of folks in other counties in the state that have my name at the bottom of their title, because the legislature said you can go to any county clerk's office and get your title. And they did that 20 some years ago. And Warren County is blessed, and I think my office was blessed to have people in it that cared about customer service. They took care of the business with the dealerships, not just the people who are coming in as what we call casual sales, who were selling cars and trucks to their neighbors. The dealerships are where we make our money and get our fee, the big amount of fees. 85% of the time, of the titles that are done for dealerships. So you got to have a good relationship with the dealers. And there are a lot of elected people that in the clerk's offices in other counties, my perception was they didn't like their dealers. Like, I'm sorry for you on that, because that's your main source of fees that you're going to get and supplement to your county treasurer. So we've been lucky, and we're lucky to have the King's Auto Mall just on our side of Fields Earl Road. And not all of those businesses, dealerships, do business with us, but half of them do, and they're owned by one corporation. So I made sure I'm on good terms with that corporation. And so I think customer service, that's what I had dealt with entirely for my 16 years at Mercury Instruments, because that was from top down. That was what he preached, was customer service. Okay, I got customer service as a kid because my dad had a successful business and I was helping him sweep floors and put pants guards on hangers. But I could see how, and I got to work that counter and work with customers directly. So I had that background. You have to have a relationship with your constituency as a township trustee. I'm looking at this microphone in front of me, and it reminds me of being in a radio studio and nobody in the studio with you most of the time. It was musical presentations. It wasn't a talk show or anything, but you better smile when you turn the microphone on, and people can hear your smile, just like on a telephone conversation. They can hear your smile, and you better be able to communicate with them that way and have them want to listen to you and to what you have to present. So customer service was a big deal, and I really was saying, I think we need some more customer service in public sector. We still do. We still do. My first day on the job, I'll be honest with you, of course I'm going to talk about customer service. And the people that we're dealing with, they're not criminals. There are clients or they're customers. I don't care what you call them, but you don't call them criminals. Yes, they're in for some criminal activity. And most of the time in the common pleas area, we deal with attorneys anyway, so it's not a big deal. But even in the office environment, we don't use the term criminal. That's one thing. That's the first thing I tried to suppress as much as I could. But when I said customer service, I literally was looking at a couple of folks, not because of anything, and the noses wrinkled up and went, customer service, what's that? You could just see it in their expression. And so I had a little bit of work to do on that, but I think we've come a very long way in 24 years. And I had people buy into it. There were little things that go on in the offices, and I don't know why, but there were things that they would only let supervisors do. Well, one of the things that they had to have a supervisor to change a cartridge in a printer. Now, I know there's state printers and they provided all the equipment, but you got to take time to have a supervisor change an ink cartridge. It was then I had one employee who told me that she was grateful to me for empowering them. And I'm like, I did? And it was just natural to me that, no, we're not going to do that. You're capable of doing that. Do it. Don't worry about it. You know how to do it. Or if you don't, you can learn. It's a cartridge. You drop it in, and granted, it had a ribbon that was exposed, and you had to be careful. In those days, you had to put it through a head and blah, blah, blah. But it could be done. And I think a lot of them appreciated that. And so that's how you got to treat your people, because they're the ones that are going to make you look good. I have 44 employees now. Now, at the time I started, I did not have county court under my wing, but that was kind of an unfortunate situation, and I was happy to help the county commissioners and the judge out with that. And so we've been there for 20 years and trying to help. That's a tougher go. People coming out of court when they've been summoned for a traffic ticket or a misdemeanor situation of an assault or something, they're not happy when they realize how big the fines are anymore in just a speeding ticket. I mean, if you're going, it's just a lot of money. And they come to that counter, and right now it's bulletproof glass because they didn't have any security back when they built that out. And so they were kind of scared for people that could just walk into the building that definitely weren't happy. I don't even know that they checked them for firearms. My first walk over there when I got put in charge of that group, I said, bulletproof glass, I don't like this. having to talk through a small little speaker. It was very much, it's busy there. I'm so much looking forward to a new county court building that's going up right now. I'm sorry I won't be here when it's done, but I'm just glad I know that it's being built. And every day I drive by there and I said, something else is going on the side. It's getting, you can see it getting finished better. And so I'm feeling good about that. And I don't think we'll have bulletproof glass. That's not my hope anyway. I don't think it's going to be necessary because we'll have a security at the front door, and all of that will be taken care of. Granted, we've got security now, but I wasn't going to tear out the glass and everything. It's going to be great in the new building, so it'll be fine. But Common Pleas is just a different beast than, I hate to use that term, but it's different than the lower level courts with the clientele that you're dealing with. So it's much easier. So we do have, COVID brought us glass at the counters, but that's all. It's not complete, and it's not sealing the counter, that type of thing. So, pardon me.
Oh, you're fine. It's been about an hour.
Oh
I don't
my
blame you
gosh.
if you.
Well, I can do that. I did this yesterday with our new clerk.
Oh, good.
He was in. We had to have some discussions with commissioners, admin people on budgeting, and since I'm the one that had to get it in, but I had to take into consideration his stuff. So they just wanted to make sure we were all on the same page, or they were on the same page with us, which we were, that made me feel pretty good too.
That's great.
Good to hear. And so we described some of the parts of your daily tasks and duties. What would you say is your day-to-day? And I don't know if you mentioned what year you were elected, but that was 96?
96. I started January 6th of 1997.
All right.
And I half-jokingly tell people that I'm a fireman. I said that to Jennifer Burnside, who's the current court administrator in Common Pleas General Division. So she brought me a little plastic fire hat. So that's in my office now too. It's almost like just people will come by and say, hey, I've got this is a little bit different. What do you think? Can we do this, or can you look at this and tell us what direction to go? That happens somewhat. I'm not going to say that's every single day, but there were times when you're in a transition with people who are very experienced and people who are very new. And to get through that learning curve, that probably gets a little bit more intense. But the day, and what I like about it is diversity. And that's pretty much what I've done my whole life. I mean, it's hard to say, okay, well, in the morning I block out this, and then in the afternoon I do this. I don't travel around to all of the offices. And the only other office that I can relate to right now, other than an elected office, is the county engineer, who has so many things going on away from the main office. Well, I have, my main office is in the Common Pleas Court building. I used to have an office when I took over county court because they had a specific room for the appointed clerk at that point in time. But that got taken over by a court administrator. They needed to expand, and I'm like, no, we have computers. I can deal with things in both areas from my desk. So the chief deputy has an office there. I'll tell you, nobody should have an office like that. It has no door. It got put into the corner of the back corner of the, built out of the back corner of the courtroom, and they didn't shim up the floor because that has a theater style slope to it down to the bench. And the first time I walked in there, and a lateral file at the top was 2 inches of space between the top of, oh, why is that so far? They're not a far apart at the bottom. They didn't shim it up and level the floor. It cracked the new desk that they put in there. This is before I got there, thank goodness, because I wouldn't have put up with that, literally. Nobody should have, but that's what we're dealing with, and that's why I'm so happy for a new building. One of the main reasons, and I digress again. So what was that question?
Daily tasks.
Daily tasks.
You were answering it.
Yeah, I was answering. This is what I do. I bounce, but I do a lot with email and phone calls, and so I have I've designated them chief deputies of Common Pleas, County Court, and Title Division. I'm dealing with a lot of things like once a month I make sure that I go through and I look at the bank balances and I make sure they're right. In all of them. But I've got bookkeepers that are so conscientious and that they're pretty good about it. And even one time in a court, we found that somebody had found a way to take money out of the till, and they were putting it back, trying to put it back on payday. Mm-hmm. And we're like, whoa, how do we let this happen? And so you look at your procedures. That's something that, yes, a supervisor does need to be involved on any voiding of any cash receipt especially. And unfortunately I had to let somebody go because we caught them doing that. I didn't let it get past to the putting it back when I did realize that they took money. And she picked the wrong guy to take the money from because he was a businessman, and I knew the name from trucks that he had here in town. So I called him. And he had half of his $300 fine voided out. And I found out he did not get any of that back. So it wasn't a mistake or anything like that. So that was a tough time. Those are hard things to do. People ask me, actually Mrs. Lamb's class over at Lebanon High School is, every year they ask me these kinds of questions too, the daily task thing, and what's the thing you like about the job, what's the thing you don't like about the job. Well, and I've had this conversation with a clerk at the time. He's now a county commissioner up in Franklin County, John O'Grady. And John and I were talking at lunch one day, and he's like, the thing I like about the job is the people. And the thing I hate about the job is the people. I said, well, that's putting it very succinctly, John, to say the least. And I said, I have to kind of agree with you. When it comes to the disciplinary actions that you have to take, you really don't want to do that. So you really take it as it's truly, I think, truly meant to be or should be, is to make it a learning experience. I'm not here to take your job away. I'm here to help you do a better job. And but that can be hard. I don't know. I guess I'm kind of old school, where you got a job, you work, you do your best job you can, and move on. And why do you have to be told all these things all the time to, you need to do this? No, that should be natural. But you try to get those folks who don't fall, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. Mm-hmm. And I felt good that my first time out, when I had some people that my father knew who said that. This one guy, he said, I figured the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree, so you got my vote. And I'm like, that's some serious stuff that I got to deal with and make sure that I do a good job. Because, again, don't ask me who my father is. And it seemed like every time I decided to ever take a trustee job or run for clerk, he was out of town. I think he did that on purpose. If he thought that I was going to do something, I wasn't in town when that happened. And we talked, obviously, but and a tremendous support. My whole family, my parents and siblings and cousins and aunts and uncles. I've had a pretty wide trail blazed for me in Warren County. I really have. But having lived in California, in Monterey for a year, seen the middle of Texas and San Angelo, and been to a foreign country for 2 years, which I think maybe we don't all have to go for 2 years, but everybody should experience a foreign country, whether it's Europe, South America, the East, Southeast Asia, Japan or whatever. I think Americans need to understand that we are unique and we're different from the rest of the world. It doesn't mean that we're better than them on a human level, but and I forgot Africa. I've been to Africa too and seen that continent, but only in one spot, but at any rate. And I say that a lot too, but
I can concur to that.
So somebody told me this week that their father told me, how was that? I think it was Brighton. Told me that he would listen to Rush Limbaugh, and Rush Limbaugh was told early on that he got fired from a radio station for saying the word "however" too many times. Mm-hmm. However, and because I think had told Brighton the story about me and my badge of honor from getting fired from a radio station, and he said, I remember the story that Rush told, and that's what that was.
I had a teacher tell me I wrote the word folks too much in my papers, so I can sympathize with this particular word that people would like to fixate on.
I think it's a folksy thing to do. I've used that in emails, but if you're in a paper or something, I know Leslie was real good at this, my younger daughter, that she would use a word here and then she'd just search like heck for something similar, but not exactly the same. And
break out that
synonyms. Synonyms were her thing. What else we got?
No problem.
I feel like I'm going through an interview for a job almost.
You've been answering a lot of the stuff. You see me go through.
I saw you mark it out
as you've been going through. I knew that's how this interview would go.
I've done that sort of thing before.
Yep.
No problem. And
right.
I've joked with Jen that this is where I have my interview too, in your exact spot, so no problem with the job interview.
Well, I've never had an exit interview either, so
quality exit.
So I'll try it to do the best I can for you.
Thank you. What does your interaction with the public look like? You mentioned some of the challenges like the bulletproof glass, but What about your typical interaction?
If I have interaction, it's mostly one-on-one. I know we've been in a new environment. We remodeled our office because we had to take security to a vast degree in the common police court, because everybody else had already done that, and ours was like the last piece. We had a counter, and you walk in the front door, and a small counter, but you had access to the whole office. You could just walk through the office on your own if you truly wanted to do that, and nobody would probably challenge you, other than if you got near the files, somebody might say, "Can I help you?" But so I moved my office away. The point is, I moved my office away from directly behind the counter, which was all windows. Thank goodness it had drapes, because then they couldn't see my desk, because people used to say Nick Nelson had a desk that was terribly messy. I think I put him to shame. I have the messiest office. Well, I moved an office that I had been in for 20 years and moved it to the other end of the building, or that room. And all of those papers from 5 years ago are still kind of boxed up and things are in disarray. So I only have a few weeks to get rid of all of that. So Brighton doesn't have to put up with it. and it'll get done. But the bottom line is, coming back to meeting with people, sometimes I'd just bring them in, or if there was an issue at the counter that I could hear, especially, I would just walk out to the, or sometimes it's the only time it ever happened, I had 2 employees, very good friends, yelling at each other. And everything's right there. I mean, there was probably somebody at the counter, and I had to get up and, ladies, in here. And by the time they walked out, everything was fine. They were friends again. They apologized to each other. I didn't care if they apologized to me. I would apologize to each other. But I would bring people in that might have an issue, and I could hear that was an issue, and I'd sit down and let's talk. Right across the desk from each other, one-on-one, I'd take as much time as I needed with it. I don't think I ever really cut anybody too short. Even people that would come in who are liaisons with state offices, like the Attorney General's office or the Auditor's office. They always have liaisons in Southwest Ohio. And gosh, I think one day I got to talking with a guy for over 3 hours, and just about everything. I mean, it's just like Jen said now, it's like the conversation just goes, and I think a lot of that has to do with, because I've done and been in so many different situations. I haven't always been in public service, but I've kind of felt like when you're dealing with the public in a business situation, you're in the public. When you're on the radio, you're in the public. Yeah, I mean, I guess I've been in public sector for a long time, and I'm happy to be alone at home, maybe watching TV, or I'd say reading a book, but now it's all the cell phones and looking at the stupid emails that I get, which are crazy sometimes, and sometimes on Facebook, but I don't read books on a phone or on a tablet or anything like that. But
I was going to say that's an option for you.
It is an option, but I read most of my books on a beach, and when we go on vacation, we usually go for 2 weeks anymore, and we do that at least twice a year. And it's kind of tough reading a tablet sometimes on the beach, I think. And I tried it with a Kindle once, and I'm like, I just like the books. Mm-hmm. I don't care if they're hardback or hardbound or softbound. I'm okay reading it that way. I'm just that old school. And
speaking of like holding on to books, kind of goes into one of the next questions. You're the holder of the court records.
Yes.
All of the court records. How have you navigated working with several different prosecutors and judges over the years? And what's that been like?
I have to come back to the word blessed, because we're so lucky in this county to have, over the years, judges who they respect the position of the clerk. Let's put it that way. And I've heard horror stories from other counties where the judges and the clerk don't get along. And we just had one clerk in one county in the state that was barred from her office by her judges as an elected official by the citizens of that county. And a judge judges took it upon themselves to say, no, you can't even come to work. And we were all taken aback by that. And I don't blame her for not running for re-election this past year. So there'll be a new clerk in that county. The funny thing is, it'll be the same party. So I know we have a lock on offices in Warren County. We're quite the red county, and I didn't choose to be a Republican. I did grow up with it, and we do a lot of things like our parents do, but I'm no different than anybody else that was in a college setting. I started getting a little bit more liberal about things. And I can tell you that my first time, and back then it was 21, when you couldn't vote till you're 21. And my first presidential election, I voted for a Democrat. Yes, it was the dumbest vote I had ever made, quite frankly. I'll say that to my Democrat friends too. But I've never, I just, and in the latest 12 years, when it's gotten so divided, I can see why people may still be doing that, but I still can't do it. I think the principles that we vote, and here in Warren County, it really comes down to being conservative fiscally that I care about. I can't even say the most. Socially conservative, yes, I feel that I am. But there are still some people that say I'm not. And I'm like, okay, that's not for me to judge. So I try to stay away from labeling myself one way or the other than I want to have good relationships with who's ever across the table from me or standing in front of me. And I've had some heated discussions with people much closer than across the table. And was thankful I kept my arms at my side. But the judges especially, P. Daniel Fetters from day one treated me like I had been in that office for 10 years. Mm-hmm. He had, and I'm like, okay, why did he do that? Because he respects the position, number one. And number two is probably because he was such good friends with my father. Everything comes back to my father. I don't regret that. I don't belittle it. I thrive on it because it's made me a better person. It's made me say, as a township trustee, because we have taken parallel paths our whole lives. My father was a Marine. I was a sailor. He was a city village councilman at the time in Mason, and I was a township trustee in Deerfield. He was county auditor. I've been clerk of courts. I will probably never be on the board of elections. And he did that after he was retired for 20 years. I mean, he passed almost 93 years of age, and only because he tipped over in his walker and hit his head, and the brain bleed killed him. And yeah, the thing that kept him alive killed him, but the medication. But and he was still sharp as a tack, still on email, telling people what he thought, and the whole bit. And I can only hope that I have that as I get older, because I think the genes are going to get me into that same range of age, barring anything drastic, because my maternal grandmother lived to be 102. And both my grandfathers were right at Dad's age, 92, 93, 94, right in that range. And my paternal grandmother died just shy of her 80th birthday, but she had a lot of medical issues, and we were happy to have her that long. She told them when they wanted her to go into, they, meaning the medical community, wanted her to go into a nursing home. She's like, not happening. It happened to be when I was overseas. I'm the oldest grandchild. So the word got back to me that said, she said she's not going until you come home at least. And I'm like, well, thank goodness I wasn't even in a war zone, but I'm glad she went home. She said my grandfather learned to give her shots and what she needed, and she lived probably, by that time, probably another good 5 or 6 years. And so I had to name our first child after her. So Allie it's a modern spelling like Allie McGraw. But yeah, my grandmother was Allie, and even technically Alice when she was born. But yeah, so we had to name her after her. So I've been blessed with that. I still have one uncle living. My dad's one of his younger brothers younger. He's now 97. Still drives, and he drives well. He doesn't drive to Florida anymore. The kids won't let him do that.
That's right.
But yeah, so I know that digressed from the judges and keeping the record, but all of the judges, Neil Bronson, Jim Flannery, I greatly respect them. Tim Oliver, another one that I knew from those early days with Jim Flannery's prosecutorial election, because that's the year I met Mike Powell, who is now, he was a probate court judge, which is not under the purview of the clerk of courts in our county. And that now Mike is an appellate court judge in the 12th district. I met the other attorney that was involved. And maybe that's what, I had all these friends early on that were attorneys. And I can remember my dad telling me one time, you should be an attorney when you grow up, the way you argue with all of your siblings. So I didn't take that seriously. So, but I don't know. And I've had an attorney tell me, yeah, you're in a position where all you have to do is get elected. I'm out here beating the pavement and I've got to earn a living. And I said, totally understand that. And I don't demean it or anything like that. And so we try to have good customer service with our attorneys as well, who are in there all the time. And I think we have. Even early on, I heard a guy say, and he was from Montgomery County, this is the best clerk's office in the area to work in. And all the ladies just turned around. I happened to be sitting at a desk out doing some work out in the open area. Did you hear that, boss? I heard it, and I understand it, and thank you very much for saying that, because we think that too. And maybe that's what happened, that the clerk's office had a reputation all along, that Judge Fetters treated me that way, and he had confidence that I could continue that role. And even today we have a whole new set of judges in Judge Oda, Judge Peeler, Judge Teep. They're easy to work with, even if they're being very pointed about something, and that happens with other elected officials too. I can remember bringing something up to Larry Sims to do something with digitizing and electronic types of situations, and he was very pointed and said, "No, I can't do that. I won't do that." And then he explained why, and I totally understood, and it's that particular issue was tough, and so. But I think that's the nice thing about us. We do have respect for each other, and judges can. The way the code reads is that the clerk will. I'm going to paraphrase this, since it's not directly in front of me, but it will be at the direction of the court. And so there are different judges, obviously, in this case of this other county, that take that very literally. You will do what I direct. But we have to work together. I guess I can't truly say, and with Jen working with us on imaging and record retention, which I greatly appreciate, because typically I don't think that my predecessor certainly never got rid of anything, and I've had a few of those orders where we destroy papers that sometimes it's tough to do. That's why I've got a garage that looks the way it does probably at home. And I have to admit these crazy things, but as far as keeping the record, I think it's easier because of the technology involved with us now, getting away from the judge's end of it. But from their no, it's not getting away from them, because now we have 3 judges that don't have a real problem with looking on a computer at a case, knowing that all the images are right there in front of them, and all they have to do is click on the docket line and they'll see it. They go to the docket line, the page or the first page is right there. And to me, that's not, and I hope you can appreciate this, that's not ANSI standards, just an image like that. The ANSI standard is right now microfilm and microfiche. And we don't know if that's going to last 500 years, but it's the best bet we got, right?
Yep.
So I see an awful lot of folks in other clerks' offices around the state, they're just saying that's the official record. And I get really nervous about things like that unless I can say, we put it on there and the next day it's microfilmed or microfiched, which would probably be best in an ongoing situation, right? Have I learned anything?
You have.
I have learned something.
You've learned a lot.
So we're not there yet, and what I can hope is that that's what happens in the near future. But even the judge, the presiding or administrative judge, Oda now, I have heard him say that we're not going to be getting rid of paper for quite a while.
Yeah.
And so now it comes back to a challenge of what do I do with the paper. So our challenge is to get a program started, and we have kind of started. My chief deputy in Common Pleas, Shannon Zeller, we're looking at DR cases and saying there are some dissolutions that have no children that we can get rid of the record in 12 years. And if everybody, it's a simple thing. And if the legislature tells us we can keep it that long, we can get rid of it. Now, what we're going to keep is the final decree in a case like that, and probably the petition. Those two things. It's like in a criminal case, we're going to keep the indictment, we're going to keep the final judgment of entry or of sentencing. And I just got asked yesterday, this is what I do too. I get emails from the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Correction wanting, hey, we got the final decree on this, or entry of sentence, but we don't have the indictment. And so at the state level, in the prison system, they want the indictment and they want the final entry. And so but I was able to go to that image in that case, which are imaged right now they're imaged all the way back fully through 2005 and forward. So but some of those we're going to have, I keep saying we, and it's going to end up being the next clerk and staff that they have to be very careful with some of those images that are there, certainly before we get rid of paper. And we have to double check some things to make sure that it's journalized and that's saved permanently. I won't delve into that. I'm getting away from a lot of stuff here, but those are things that happen in the office, and things from the Ohio Public Defender's Office. We've got that ongoing where they want reimbursed if a defendant who's generally on probation, we collect money from them in the clerk's office on behalf of the court. And if they've paid for their public defender attorney fees, the state public defender wants a share of the same share that they gave to the county to provide that. They want that reimbursed to them. So I came up with a method to have databases of attorney fees that have been paid and public defender fees or costs that have been provided to the county. And then I got something. It's not the best, but it was the best that I could do. I got Access, the Microsoft Access program, to merge what was the same. And we've been doing that for a long time. Got away from it a little bit when the public defender would only tell us who they were rejecting, not who they were paying. So I got to get back on track with that, and it'll be in place for the next clerk. It'll be ready. But budgeting, you do your budget. You technically look at it twice a year at the county level, anyway. And once you get it set and approved by the appropriations by the county commissioners, you're constantly looking at it to make sure that nothing has happened, or if something does happen to deplete funds, you've got to be able to look for ways to either transfer money, and that's a constant thing. And in the county, that can get, it's not like a private business situation where I could, if I had the owner of a company, and I'm relating to the one that I did have, if I was a person that could make a recommendation to him, I would put the recommendation, I could put what execution I would do on it, and then discuss it and drop it to him, and he'd just initial it, yay or nay. And that's not quite that easy with government. It takes forever. It's not forever, but so I have to provide a resolution to the county commissioners what I want to move. They don't mess with what's within my overall budget number, as long as I'm transferring things within that budget. But they're the ones that have to approve it as a change. But from what was done earlier, I'm not 100% sure why, and not after 28 years either. But that's the way it is. Supplemental appropriations, where you have to ask them for more money to be budgeted. Yeah, I see that going through, and that's what the only time we have to do that's when we repay that public defender office. We'll ask for a supplement because you can't put that in the budget. So we'll say, hey, I need this supplemented into this line item down here. Here's a line item for it, and then we put the auditor gets to pull it out of that fund, and everything's fine and dandy. So not only working with judges, but really working with almost every. I mean, I've mentioned the sheriff. We have things on foreclosures that go through the recorder's office. The treasurer, not so much, except that the clerk of courts in our county serves on the investment advisory board with the treasurer and the 3 county commissioners. And I don't even know if they know that if the board is usually, is it 1 commissioner, the treasurer, or 2 commissioners and the treasurer? 2 commissioners and the treasurer is the way that the code sets it up. However, if that 3rd trustee or commissioner wants to be involved, then they have to get another official involved, and that's the clerk of court. So it's a 3-member board to begin with, but if the 3rd commissioner wants to be in on it, the clerk gets to be on the investment advisory board, which is not a bad thing because I do have investments. I am able to do investments through our general fund and what we collect from the defendants, and in paper, not paper, but civil filings, a lot of that, there's fees that get paid, and things can build up, and you don't always need that money. To be honest with you, I've got over $300,000 in investments out there on CDs. I brought it down a little bit from what I inherited, but they've been CDs since 1987, and that was 10 years before I started, and that same amount of money is out there to be invested in various banks and whatnot, and at various interest rates. So that's been a little bit tough to keep up with recently, but I don't need to talk about that stuff, right? That's getting too much in the weeds. I appreciate every judge I've ever worked with, and I didn't even mention the other domestic relations judge that I think I may have mentioned Tim Oliver, but Jeff Kirby is now
Yeah.
our domestic relations judge. You just can't get better people than what I've had to work with, because they truly care about their work, the citizens of the county, and making sure they do the right thing. And I couldn't be happier that the thing I did learn to love this job, and I probably did stay one term too many, and that may have been why I got primary opposition. I don't know, 4 years ago. It doesn't matter. But I told people then that my grandfather, he farmed 100 acres on Utica Road above Lebanon, and he farmed it until he was 76 years old. I can sit at a desk till I'm 76. So that's what I told him 4 years ago. And now I'm telling him I don't have anything for 80. So I'm not going. I have a 2-year-old grandchild who's a ton of energy. So
You're gonna have to chase her.
I've already fallen chasing him one time when he was headed for a street. It was my fault. I was watching him, and I had to fall so I wouldn't fall on him after I caught him before he got to the street. And it was a nice, freshly sealed asphalt parking lot. I ended up on my side.
Had to be, right?
Those ribs were hurting for a few. I related to what Joe Burrow is probably going through this week.
Every week, honestly.
Well, every week. Yeah, you got to be hurting in here, and because I took that blow directly here. It didn't hurt my elbow, didn't hurt my shoulder, and the way he gets hit, it's usually the same kind of thing where you're like that. Oh my goodness.
But he's finished it. He's healed up in a day, right? Comparatively. 2
weeks.
Oof.
Yeah, but I didn't have an ice bath to jump into. And I overexerted one time. I had to drive 4 fence posts in the ground with a pole driver. Ooh. And as soon as I did the first one in the first movement, I'm like, this is not what you should be doing. But I didn't have anybody else to do it. So I had to do the 4 and got done with it. And that added another week to it.
Yeah.
Oh, poor Jim.
It's not.
I survived. It's no big deal. It is what it is, you know?
Yeah, you're here talking to us. What are some of the most important things you've learned working at Warren County?
Wow, learned?
Yeah.
Well, I have learned
Pretty
a lot
loaded.
about the legal system. There's no doubt about that. And learned how government does work.
Yeah.
It can be slow, but you can still have good. I come back to customer service. Mm-hmm. You still got to treat people with respect, and be respectful when you can't help them the way they want to see something come out. I guess I've learned how to do that. Well, I learned that early on too. I mean, every place I've been, every place you are, you're going to learn something. You're going to learn something from doing this with people. And every step of your life is like that. It's constant learning. We get told that over and over, but truly it is. I do on-the-job training. Every job that I've ever had truly has been on-the-job training. I went to a trade school for broadcasting, but you still have to have kind of a natural instinct for that sort of thing. You have to have voice inflection and things like that. What I've learned here at the county, I've learned that I use the word blessed a lot. Even I don't use however a lot, but I use at any rate a lot. But blessed. I think Warren County, it truly epitomizes the term the incredible county. I don't know. I've lived here all my life, other than when I was in, college age and in the service. Those things helped me coming back here because of what I experienced out there in some way. Gosh, that's a tough question. It's like one of the tough questions I ask at the end of interviews of people I'm interviewing. How do I answer that? I have learned to appreciate what elected officials have on their plates, no matter the job. And for the most part, I respect people for that even want to step up and do it. I mean, that number one. I just guess I've learned more about the county. I knew about the roads from high school when I drove around and counted all those culverts in half the county and crawled around inside some of them. Great experience, great learning stuff, but it's hard to say, pinpoint on one thing.
Yeah.
You could probably say a word and that might lead me to a better answer, but most of my answers when it comes to what I've learned, what's good, it comes down to the people that I'm around and interact with. If I can just keep humanity at the top of my frame of thinking, I'll be all right. And I think I've done. And honestly, I'll put this out there that I think sitting in a pew in a church every Sunday, or most Sundays anyway, has a lot to do with that. It has a lot to do with that. And I know it gave me the strength to speak at my father's funeral. My grandmother, one of them, she wanted me to speak at my grandfather's funeral and give his eulogy and what he did in his life. And I'm glad I didn't get asked to do that on the other one, because I was a blubbering idiot that day. I do wear my emotions on my sleeve. Most people wouldn't know this, but my father did too. So that's another. Not only do I look like him, I sound like him. My hair is not like him. He used to introduce me as his father. This is my father, Jim, who has all the gray hair. Anyway, but that's just, he was a storyteller. So yeah, I guess I've just learned to appreciate the human race more. As tough as it can be sometimes. Mm-hmm. And yeah.
Is that who you're going to miss the most, is the people in the county?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, but I'll be involved somehow. I mean, like I said, I'm already doing some things with talking to the Historical Society about growing up in Mason in the 50s and 60s, some of the 70s, I guess. They're going to do a documentary on that. Mm-hmm. And I have been asked to narrate it. So I hope that's holding still and I'm not giving false information out. So I hope my voice, which now is starting to falter after 2 hours.
About 5 from 2 hours. You're doing good. We try to keep it at around 2 hours, so no worries.
No, it's fun. I enjoy it. I enjoy talking about all the things. I'm not bragging about them. I hope I'm not bragging about them, because I truly feel that it's helped. Everything has helped me get to where I am today. And so I'm not afraid of these on-the-job trainings. I'm not afraid to learn about record retention, and the clerks are called the keeper of the record. That's the short-term, quick answer for people. And we are responsible for a lot of what is maintained and is good for people to be able to see where our county has come from.
Yeah.
From that log cabin out at Beetle Station to the incredible county with the Cincinnati Open going to be here for 25 more years. I mean, that's kind of top of mind from our discussions with county administrator and the finance, or well, his deputy administrator, when the bottom line on the budget this year is how do we make sure that we meaning the commissioners, get the money in the right spot for their promise to give so many million to make that happen. And being from Mason and having worked that tournament for many, many years in the parking lot, I've never been run over by anybody. I do have a friend who got knocked down, but I have another story there where we had a junior high kid parking people, and they didn't want to park where he was going to put them. And he had a walkie-talkie, and he got on. He just, I need a tow truck here. The guy moved his car pretty quick after that, and the junior high kid became a police officer after he graduated high school. But yeah, so that's not just a Mason thing. That's a countywide thing. It's important for our county to have a lot of the things that we have, and we have such a good blend of businesses. And I know we're eating up a lot of farmland, and it's so different from when I was a kid. And I would go stay for a couple of weeks at my grandparents' house on Utica Road, and I would jokingly ask them, "How come I'm always up here during hay baling season?" And it was a good life. I mean, it was good training. I had a lot of good mentors, from family to school teachers. I got a chance to, in high school, it was a presidential election year, and the two nominees were the incumbent, Lyndon Johnson, and Barry Goldwater was running against him. And so we divided our class up. Well, there were 3 of us on the Goldwater side and 20-some on the Johnson side, even in Mason in the early days. And of course, we were probably just doing what our parents told us to do. Not, they didn't tell us, but I love the AUH2O stuff. But and I think I made some good debatable comments, and I learned how to present that in a tough environment. And some of my public speaking areas where I have gone in front of people to do a quote-unquote speech is when I was learning that it was actually in JC's, and there were about 5 of us, and I knew all of these guys from when we were kids, and we were in our 30s, early 30s anyway, and I had to give a 2-minute speech to them, and I was like this. I was shaking like a leaf, but of course my mother, whenever I would do that and she was around, she would say, "You did fine." I was just hanging onto a podium and nobody could see me shaking, I guess. So I had that experience as a young man growing up here in Warren County, and I'm just happy to be able to give some of that back and show that. Yeah, it's been good for me. I know people sometimes say, "Oh, you're just in it for the retirement," and I can't deny that. I know, because I saw my parents. They had a good life after they retired. And I'm grateful. I'm just totally grateful for the opportunity to do this. And I just hope that, you just hope whenever you're in office like this, you don't screw it up. Yeah. And after those 4 terms as a trustee, I still remember the first time I got elected. I was 33 years old, and there was a reporter for the Western Star that everybody in the county knew at the time, I'm sure, at least knows his family still today. It's Chuck Kaufman. Chuck wrote, and I don't know that he wrote the headline, but Chuck wrote the article that was headlined, "The Spaeth Name." Now I'm on the spot. "The magic of the Spaeth name comes through." And I just went, "Oh my goodness, Chuck." And I knew Chuck, he was my age. I'm like, come on. So that was actually a challenge. And so, okay, I'm glad for my family. They have blazed a trail. My dad's first cousin was Carl Spaeth, who was on the Mason School Board for years. Then he became part of the Warren County Board of Education. My grandfather, the first time I knew he was in public office was when I saw a plaque at the old Mason Elementary School, which is now the administrative offices, and had my grandfather's name on it for building the gymnasium and the auditorium. And I'm like, wow, he was on the school board in the 30s or so. So I know my family's been around a long time, and whether it's in business or whatever, that Uncle Ralph, who's 97, he had a business in town that I think every Spaeth kid, male anyway, worked in. And even his daughter worked in the office later on. But we all had some part-time jobs there, making little screws. So for all kinds of companies that are now made in China. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And he's not in business anymore. But yeah, they had to sell that business, and that was a shame because they built it from the ground up. Yeah. There's more stories I could tell about that, but you don't want to hear these, I know. I don't think anybody needs to hear them on camera.
We can always we always check it on later.
Okay, edit that part out? No, we don't do that with interviews. No, get the full thing.
Is there any advice you'd like to give to any current Warren County employee?
No, not really. No matter really whatever job you're working in, make the most out of it. Give it your all. Because, number one, it may not last, but that's what's expected of us, is to, I think, do our best in whatever we do. Sometimes we fall down, and I make mistakes too, but you just have to, I don't know. I probably don't learn from them so much at home because my wife's continually asking me, why is that way? Why did you do this? And I'm like, okay, I know. But I think that's probably my escape. So when I treat that as my castle, that would be my advice to married folks is get over it and pay attention to your castle as you're paying attention to the details in your work. I think I've gotten into the habit of just getting home and saying, I don't want to hear the phone ring. I don't want to talk to anybody. I know my daughter, when she lived with us, when she first started teaching, she'd be sitting in the driveway, and you could just see her leaning back in the car with her eyes closed and decompressing from being with kids all day long. But I don't know if she still does that, but she still does. I mean, we can't call her or text her after 8:30 during the school year. But yeah, you got to be careful in all your relationships. And my advice is just do your best. Be the best you can. And if something, I mean, I've had failure in my life. I failed college. I didn't do a good job with it. And I got why can't you, when I graduated second in my class at Career Academy School of Broadcasting, now why can't you do that in college, son? Not from my father, from my mother. And I'm like, oh boy. I said, I guess I just love this better. And this is where and I did that for, like I said, I've made a living doing that, a part of my living anyway. And people still say, you should be in radio. And I'm like, I did that for 25 years already. and so, yeah, and I have not been on air in that type of job for 28 years. I gave it up when I became clerk. I had earlier had an opponent in a township trustee meeting, or not election, who called the radio station and said, I want equal time. And I'm like, and they're like, what do we do? I said, I won't say my name I don't care if I say my name on the air. I don't care about that. I'll just come in here and have a good time. And I did that for about 4 weekends. Got another call.
Yeah.
Then the attorneys got involved.
Oh.
And so I had to come off the air, and what I lost in salary was about how much my campaign cost then. I mean, which, don't get me wrong, it was not big amount of money back in those days. This was in the mid 90s or early 90s. And it was several $100s. I mean, not it wasn't any more than $1,000. And got taken off the air. That's how much money I lost. That's how much money I could have used in my campaign. But it's all right. It's all right. And I knew that would get worse if I had a countywide job. And the station has become very popular anyway. With it's the first time I had not the first time I had a country music venue, but I started that in '81 with them. But I had done country music in the mid '70s for about a year with that Fairfield station, which had the call letters WCNW. And I'm like, it looks to me like it stands for country and western. And they still go by CNW, I think. But I couldn't, well, they trained me, they changed the FM to an easy listening. I had to learn how to say, Love 95. And it doesn't exist anymore either, so they're the ones that fired me, so that's the way it goes.
Whatever then. Is there anything additional you like to add?
Oh my God, you don't want me to tell anymore.
Up to you. I always like to put this at the end just in case you want to highlight any current projects, but it's up to you ultimately.
Well, the one thing that that I didn't really talk about, I talked a little bit about the title division.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The very first thing I did when we came in, and each of the three of us who were running in that first primary were all saying we need a Mason title office. We need a title office in Mason. And so I certainly followed through with that, just like they would have done. And we found some office space right next door to in the same building as the Mason License Services Bureau. And I wanted to do that throughout the county. Well, Franklin had already been established as a branch title office there, alongside their License Services Bureau. Some people just call it the BMV, but we do BMV titling, so sometimes it gets a little mixed up there. As a matter of fact, I had some folks that thought I was in charge of all of the BMVs in the county as well at one point in time, and I'm like, no. I can't say I didn't consider doing that as I dealt with legislation and titling issues at the state level. I had been president of the Ohio Clerk of Courts Association in 2004, and that's about the time when this we called it cross-county titling, went into effect. So the very first person that carried that legislation was George Terwilliger, our state rep from Warren County. So I got involved there because our association said, he's your state rep, we want you involved in that. So we went to stakeholders meeting that he put on at the State House one time. Every stakeholder that you can even think of was there. I gave George a lot of credit for that. He was good at that. If you had a say or affected you in any way, he wanted you at the table so that you could look across the table and we could see everybody, hear everybody's ideas and what they were thinking, what we were thinking. But the time ran out on that, and he was term limited out. Well, he may have, I don't know that he was term limited, but the bills have to go away at the end of the 2-year, the biennial session. And so it got brought up the next session, but it got brought up as a Senate bill. Now that senator was basically clerks of court. This legislation's moving. It's moving quickly. Get on board, or get left at the station. Totally different concept from George's approach. It got done, and we had to deal with it. There were 2/3 of the counties in the state lost a lot of money when that happened because they don't have dealerships. And they certainly did. Some of them don't have. There may be some that don't even have a used car dealership. But most of those did not even have new car dealerships. And so they're all concentrated in we've got an auto mall. There's an auto mall in Medina County in New Brunswick. There's Columbus, which has a huge amount of dealerships. And that's where it was driven. Because when you get into the titling of vehicles and watercraft, when the dealers sell something, at that time they had to just go out to send all of this work out to all of the 88 counties. If they had a customer in Columbus that was from Williams County or from Geauga, not Geauga, but even Geauga, but my reference is Gallia County is where I really wanted to go with that. But so they'd send drivers out just like spokes out of the wheel, the hub of a wheel, and go out and then come back in and pick up the work if it was done on the way back and things like that, or go out the next day and pick up the previous day's work, and just a constant thing like that. And so the electronic, they called it an electronic titling bill, but that hasn't happened until just the last year and a half. But so we truly call it a cross-county titling bill. We had a 5-year period that we talked them into weaning everybody off so that we had a subsidy going to those smaller counties that were losing money. They also gave the really small counties an opportunity to be a deputy registrar in their counties. The problem with that is those small counties, there's some counties here that don't have 40,000 people. Mm-hmm. We've got, 50 or 60,000 just in Mason Deerfield. And that's the area I know, so that's why I say that way. But it's worked out. Some of the clerks took them up on it, but some of them were saying, that's my best friend, it's the BMV deputy registrar, I'm not going to put her out of business. So, and it is a business. They are private contractors. They're not employees of the state of Ohio or the county. They are business people who say, I'll do that business, and they put in a bid, and this registrar, who is appointed by the governor, appoints them as deputy registrars. So, and you can see we've had some changes in Lebanon and Mason area with deputy registrars, and I think there's been some noticeable changes there. My point was and going back to my original talking point about titling and where we had it, we opened the Mason office, and we've since moved across the street with the cooperation of the BMV deputy registrar, and we're there on Reading Road. And then we've moved the original Franklin office down the street 20 some years ago to a street level building. We were in the old post office building. It was built in the 30s, and those buildings built by the WPA all had 100 steps in front of them. Okay, I exaggerate, but it probably had a good 10 steps up to the doors. Yeah, we had a ramp in the back, but anyway, it was a good move for us, although I must say it was an old 5 and dime, and I didn't realize when I looked through the window and couldn't go inside, and I laid out something because I walked it on the outside of the building, and I laid out how I'd like to, we can make this work. I walked in the first 30 feet are sloped up. And I'm like, what? And I didn't think outside the box. I still could have done it the way I wanted it, but I didn't think outside the box. And that's on me. But we made it work, and we since we've just got done with a remodel this year of the Franklin office, and Mason several. Oh my gosh, has it been 17 years? I can't believe that, but it has been 17 years ago. We expanded the front end of that office and changed it to a nice L-shaped counter, just like we have in Lebanon, and makes it much easier on the customers. We can get more customers in,
There we go.
things like that. And then probably 8 years ago, we had a situation where the Hamilton County Clerk of Courts at the time put an office in a strip center right across from King's Toyota, which is the flagship dealership of what's called Kenwood Dealer Group. And probably at one time they were like the 5th largest volume dealership in the state. And they were our customer. And of course we knew the management, I knew them. I didn't know the general manager. I'd met him one time, but I did know the owner of KDG, Bob Reichert, and had met with him a couple of times. And from a business standpoint, are we doing okay? What else can we do? And just getting to know him, letting him know us. And we went in and talked to Jerry Carmichael, was the GM at Toyota at the time, and a vice president in the overall group. And he said, I've lived in Warren County for 30 years. I'm going to do my business in Warren County. I'm not going across the street with it. And he said he didn't know about that going on. And I'm like, I think he knew. But he was very gracious. And then he offered me a spot to put an office in one of his dealerships. And I just looked at my chief deputy, Vicki Gray, at the time. And I know, Jen, you've worked with Vicki, so you knew what kind of personality she has.
Oh, yes.
Vicki had been trying to get me to put a dealer-only office down in that area for 5 years at least, minimum. And I kept demurring, saying, too close. And that's what I told Jerry. I said, I'm not crazy about putting an office inside one dealership. So these guys bought a building 1.5 miles away from the auto mall up on Socialville Foster Road, just off of Mesa Montgomery. So it's main, nice intersection, suited well. And they consolidated all of their title work into that building. And they offered me a spot on the side that had an outside entrance. And then it was just a small 400 square foot office, or it is. And with a door that we lock, they put their title work from these multiple dealerships, and they put it outside our door. We open the door, we pick it, and sometimes I'll be frank with you, the door's not locked all the time. They walk the paperwork in and drop it off. And I've got 2 to 3 people, depending on how much the volume is, that work out of that office doing dealer work only, which goes very smoothly, because it's with a casual sale, you really don't know who the person is in front of you, who you're selling it to, or even if that person's there. It's usually the tail end, it's just the buyer that comes in. And so you're going through all the evidence, and you have to make sure the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. But dealers, yeah, we have to make sure they do that, but it's very consistent. The work is always the same, so you can just move through dealer work pretty quickly. And since it's 80 to 85% of our volume, it's pretty important work and time that's invested. So they offered me a deal I couldn't refuse. I don't have to pay utilities. I pay less than $300 a month for the space. I don't have to walk through their area. There's no compromise there. All the titles are locked in our area, and we don't keep that many there anyway. We try not to keep the titles. We only divvy them out whenever we have to. and we have to do 150,000 in all the 4 offices now. 3 public and what I call 3 public offices in 1 dealer office. So we've come a long way from having a main office in the court building and a Franklin title office when I got here. So
Come a long way.
So now, and then when I got county court, which is across the street from the common police court, so I have 6 different locations, and they all do me well. They just, I'm really, I guess if I want to say that I'm proud of something, I'm proud of the staff that we have now overall. I don't hire by political party. I've already made that known to others. Maybe that rankled some party people, I don't know. Because government jobs used to be your buddy down the street or your political ally and, their wife and their daughter. And I mean, there's nothing, if the person can do the job, for crying out loud, until they wrote the nepotism into the law. My mother worked for my father the last few years that he was in office. The county engineer's wife worked for him. The sheriff's wife worked in the jail when it was small because they needed a matron for the jail. So, the easiest thing to do is, hey, the wife of the sheriff gets to be the matron of the jail. And so and then they did the nepotism, and you can't do that anymore. And so I can't hire my daughters, I can't hire my wife, but after that, I quite frankly, one time I did hire a niece. It's on my wife's side of the family. So, and she was flat out good. She was single. Then she got married. Then she had a baby. Then she wanted to raise the baby at home. She didn't want to work anymore. She did try. I said, just come on back and see what you like. So she is now, I won't say her age. Let's just say she has 6 kids. Oh. And the oldest is 24 maybe, wow. And the youngest is 9.
Yes.
God bless her. Yeah. And she homeschools. Yeah. So that's the kind of person that I hired. And I knew she was good. She'd be good at whatever she did. And so that's what I feel like, that I'm handing off a good group of people to Brighton. I've taken him to all the title offices. He's been in the common police office several times. Yesterday, as a matter of fact, was the last time we had him in, and he came in to do that budget discussion for an hour or so, and then we just got to talking with, he is going to put an individual in as his number 2 person. I have never had a number 2 person. When I came in, there wasn't a number 2, and I didn't really have anybody to pull in like that. So I just left those chiefs at the time, title and common pleas, and then section areas that had supervisors, but then county court have that as a chief deputy thing, but not a true chief deputy clerk of court, just chief deputy of that division. Titles. I had 5 titles at Mercury Instruments at one time or another. Not all at the same time. Okay. But I'm like, I don't care. Ed, do I have a job? Yes, you got a job. Okay, good. I don't care what you call me. I'm serious. But, and did I say that Mercury Instruments doesn't exist anymore? Because the day I became clerk was the day the son-in-law took over the presidency of the company. And I'll say it here in a public area, he drove it into the ground. Mm-hmm. There's no more manufacturing of instrumentation on Virginia Avenue in Fairfax. Mm-hmm. It is, if they're doing it, Honeywell bought the company and moved it to Mexico, from what I hear. So I made the right move at the time. I mean, my wife at the time was like, what are you going to do after your 4-year term and you don't get reelected? well, thanks for the confidence, number one, but it's a fair question. It was certainly a fair question. And I said, I'm confident that it's not going to happen. And the way the old company worked out, well, I brought the vice president of production that got pushed out before they went under, and I brought him up here. And he became my chief deputy eventually of Common Pleas Division. And Dave Gilreath, and the first year he worked for us, he was in a file clerk's job. He was filing paperwork for file clerk pay. I wasn't going to pay him as a vice president. I don't know what he made. We couldn't talk about that at Mercury. We were told we could not talk about salary or how much any of us made. And that took that off the table so you could get along a little bit better and stick to business.
So you feel like you made the right move now then, going towards retirement?
I did. Yeah. For retirement, I mean, I'm lucky to have gotten into something that I love to do. And there's several things I still love. I'm going to say talking, but everybody knows that. But just being on the radio or doing voice work, narrating something at church. I have our youth director, whenever she introduces me to somebody new, make sure that she tells them, I'm the voice of God. Right now I'm not, and we do skits and we do VBS stuff, and I volunteer with that, and nice. I do the drama, and I've played all the characters in the Bible practically, and one thing I love there is that a former bell choir director, she had a favorite. I know it's her favorite because at her funeral, it was on the program. It was Psalm 121. And she had the bells playing some music that was geared towards that. And it had words, but there was some comment made by whoever put the arrangement together that said, shouldn't use the words with this, just let the music play for itself. Well, she didn't agree with that, and she asked me to do the words. And if you read, it's beautiful. She gave me a CD of it, and I've never listened to it, but I did the words. I lift mine eyes unto the hills, from whence comes my strength. And the music behind the bells, it gives me chills just thinking about it. So those are the types of voiceover narration stuff that I really get a lot out of. And I don't have to be paid for that. I get enough satisfaction that it got pulled off, even though somebody said we shouldn't do narration on it. But Bonnie was right, and I'm glad she let me be a part of that. So, and if they need me for the voice of God, it's fine. I can do that.
You'll be there.
And I said it in the way, who was it? I think Rush Limbaugh said it the way I just did. I think that's where I got that. The voice of God. He would say it that way, I think, as I recall. Best I recall. Because I forget everything. I won't even remember what I talked about here today.
No.
Luckily, it'll be on video.
Dang, gone. I thought you turned that off a long time ago. I thought I heard it click.
Well, thank you, Jim. We appreciate you taking all your time.
Well, I appreciate your time.
And I think you had a lot of things in here that I didn't even know. And I've known you for 12 years now. So.
No, I keep some stuff hidden. No, it's just, and Shannon, Vicky, those are the ones that I know the best in my role here and as supervisors, and who I work with on a day-to-day basis, whether it's in person or by email or on the phone. Seems like I can always tell Vicky's ring when the phone goes off. But At least I kid that it's her, and honestly, 90% of the time I get it right. But even though, and that's when I'm away from the phone. We have phones that tell us who's on the other end, right? At least internally. So no, they know me pretty. They've heard. Shannon's just amazed. When I was with Brighton yesterday, after we got done with that hour-long thing, we went until 3:30. No, it was almost 4 o'clock. Just talking about stuff that's going to need to be done and how we're doing it and how this happened. And so I appreciate him doing that. I did a little bit of that when I came in. It was more one-on-one with Paul Harrison at the time. And I appreciated that. I didn't come in early. And that's the other side of that was, I can tell you the kind of company Mercury was. I mean, I had to tell them I was even going to run. There's no way I was going to keep that secret from them. So when you start a campaign, you're starting it a year and a half because you've got to be prepared for a primary. And in the cycle that office is in, it's in the presidential election year, which gets moved up from May to March every 4 years. So now you got to start everything else. So you got to get your petitions in 3 months earlier than normal and that sort of thing. And so I went to my boss and I told him, I said, I'm running for clerk of courts. And he just looked at me and he said, do you think you can win? And I said, Ed, and he knew I was a township trustee, because I'd gotten into trouble with him one time. Somebody called me at work, and it was another trustee, and he's like, you're never here, you never do this, and you never do. I said, I got a full-time job, and we have a full-time administrator there. I don't need to be there every day. And I said, what happens when you walk into that township office? I said, all people stop, and they pay attention to you, and they don't do what they were doing. So why should I go and do the same thing? If all three of us did that, oh my gosh, they'd never get anything done. And I know that's how county commissioners can be here, I'm sure, and why they have a staff to take care of these things. But because technically I think that is a part-time job. Some people treat my job as part-time. I took it as a job. I took it as a full-time job. I didn't have any other job other than the whippy dip. And yeah, whatever. Some of that took me away from mostly association stuff. I'm in here every day. Now I'll be the first to admit I don't get here at 8 o'clock like everybody else. And I had one employee that would say, well, he's not in here. He's got 6 offices he's responsible for. He's probably in one of the other ones. That wasn't true. I said, Carl, that's not me. I'm not doing that. But whatever. Yeah, and there's a lot of responsibility there. But I would rather have that than a township trustee job right now. And like I said, that ton of bricks got lifted off of me. And I thought, whatever goes right, whatever goes wrong, it's all on me, so we don't have to get into all of this tug-of-war stuff and figuring stuff out. I get to figure it out. And I love that challenge. I hope I've hit more on the good side than the bad side, that's all. Because I know there's going to be both, probably with anybody, again, because of the human element. See how I drag on?
So.
Well, thank you.
I told Shannon, I said, maybe I'll get done and we'll come do purchase orders for 2025.
There you go.
Well, we've had to put it off 3 days in a row already, 4 days now.
That sounds like you've got things to do. So
I do, and I've got a whole office to get cleared out. And I got so many pieces of paper that don't need to be kept anywhere. I can swear to that.
You know where to find the boxes.
I know where to find the boxes, that's sure. I've got 2 of them underneath the table right now. Neither one of them full. And I'm trying to remember, it's been so long since I've got that first start whether they're ones to keep or whether they're just ones to throw away. So,
All right.
no, I've thrown a lot away. I recycle. I put it in a recycle bin. I don't know whether they put it outside or if it's designated or not. I can't control that. At home, I can. I can control that. My wife throws stuff away. It doesn't belong there. It belongs over here. Oh, well. You do have that off now, right?
No.
Oh, God, I'm in trouble.
No worries.
No, I'm always in trouble.
We can
at
always
home.
we can always cut a little bit.
No,
That's not a
thank
problem. But that
Thank you.
concludes the rest of our interview.
Thank
So
you
thank
for
you so
saying
much.
that.
I
That
appreciate
way, that's like reading the end. Okay, I got it.